All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're tracing the vital, and yeah, sometimes challenging, but incredibly rewarding journey of supporting learners with emotional behavioral disorders, or EBD. We're pulling foundational concepts straight from the source material and turning them into practical, actionable understanding. So whether you're an educator, a parent, or just someone who's really passionate about inclusive environments, this deep dive is completely designed to clarify the path forward.
Here's our roadmap for today. We'll be hitting 1. Defining emotional behavioral disorder, 2. Traits and observable behaviors, 3. The rules of assessment, 4. Screening and observation tools, 5. Functional behavior analysis, and finally, 6. Educational approaches and support. Let's get to it. Section 1, Defining Emotional Behavioral Disorder. To really kick off this journey, we first got to lock down exactly what we mean when we talk about these disorders.
Grounding our entire discussion today in the source material's core educational principles is absolutely crucial. Because, there's a real human effort behind every single textbook term to actually understand and categorize what a student needs.
Now, the central takeaway from IDA 2004 is that EBD is officially recognized as a disability based on prolonged emotional or behavioral responses in an educational setting. I really want to emphasize that phrase, over a long period of time. We aren't just talking about a kid having a random bad day or a tough week because they didn't sleep well. This is a consistent, enduring condition that significantly impacts their school experience.
It's also super helpful to see how specific conditions sit under this broad EBD umbrella, distinguishing perfectly between internal and external struggles. On one hand, you've got anxiety, defined here as the internal feeling of distress. On the flip side, there's conduct disorder, or CD, which is a consistent outward pattern of antisocial behavior. Honestly, nailing down this difference is the very first key to helping a child.
Moving right along to Section 2, Traits and Observable Behaviors. Let's translate those definitions into what we actually see as barriers in a real classroom.
Instead of just labeling these as problems a child has, we really have to reframe them as severe barriers the child is facing every single day. The research notes that these learners might have average to below average cognitive scores, which translates into academic deficits and lower achievement. But pay close attention to the language and social skill deficits. There's a massive, undeniable connection between behavioral issues and communication. If a student literally can't express their frustration with words, well, they're going to express it with their behavior. And naturally, that makes sustaining connections with peers and adults incredibly tough.
To dig a bit deeper, we categorize these problem behaviors into two sharp contrasts. Externalizing behaviors are directed outward, kind of like an erupting volcano of outbursts or aggression that everyone around them can easily observe. Internalizing behaviors, though, that's more like a turtle pulling completely into its shell. It's painfully directed inward, exhibited within the self. Think withdrawal, intense sadness, or that anxiety we just mentioned. Both are seriously impactful, even if one is a whole lot louder than the other.
Which brings us to Section 3, the rules of assessment. Once we actually spot these behaviors, we don't just jump to conclusions. We enter a highly structured phase of evaluation.
And the source material makes it totally clear. Assessing a child is definitely not taken lightly. It's a rigorous process bound by incredibly strict, protective administrative guidelines. This is literally designed to ensure no child is ever unfairly labeled or marginalized based on assumptions.
So, what are these non-negotiable rules? First up, parents are central to the whole thing. Active parental participation is an absolute must. Second, we use a multidisciplinary team approach, getting a diverse group of qualified pros involved. Third is accurate and fair evaluation, meaning all suspected disabilities are thoroughly examined. Fourth, confidentiality is paramount. Data stays only with authorized personnel and the family. And finally, the right to due process, meaning parents have a legal right to mediation or hearings. These rules fiercely protect the student's legal rights at every single step. All right, Section 4, Screening and Observation Tools. With those ironclad rules locked in, how do we actually gather accurate, objective data on a student's needs?
We essentially have three primary screening tools in our toolkit here. The Child Behavior Checklist, or CBCL, is your standard go-to tool for detecting emotional and behavioral problems. Then there's the BERS 3, which I find really fascinating because it evaluates a student's interpersonal and affective strengths rather than just focusing on their deficits. And for the younger crowd, specifically grades 1 through 5, the SSBD uses a multiple gating 3-stage system to catch and support those early learners.
But we don't just rely on checklists. Direct observation is a huge, highly accurate method. When experts observe a child in their natural setting, they aren't just guessing. They are literally tallying exactly what happens using 5 concrete measurements. They track frequency, so how often it occurs, duration, how long it lasts, latency, the time between situations or prompts, topography, which is the actual physical shape or form of the behavior, and magnitude, the sheer intensity. It paints a highly objective picture of classroom reality.
Next up, Section 5, Functional Behavior Analysis. Gathering all that precise data leads us right into where the real detective work happens. So here's the crucial point. A functional behavioral assessment, or FBA, is absolutely not about just slapping a label on a bad behavior. It's a systematic effort to comprehend the behavior so we can properly intervene. Basically, we're hunting for the function, or the why, behind what the student is doing. Are they acting out to avoid a really tough math task? Or are they just seeking attention? Once you figure out the function, you can actually build the bridge to a solution.
To find that why, professionals act like investigators using 3 distinct methods. They might use an indirect FBA, collecting info from teachers and folks who interact directly with the student. They use descriptive FBAs, which means directly observing the antecedents, basically what happens right before the behavior kicks off. And then there's functional analysis, which is a highly controlled procedure where they actually manipulate those antecedents and subsequent events to definitively see how the target behavior changes.
And finally, Section 6, Educational Approaches and Support. Let's see how all this deep analysis translates into putting real, actionable, evidence-based support systems into the classroom.
This brings us right to the PBIS framework, Positive Behavioral Interventions and Supports. It's an amazing, multi-tiered system. At Tier 1, we support all students universally with clear expectations. At Tier 2, we zoom in with targeted, focused interventions for smaller groups. And for those students with the most significant behavioral needs, we move to Tier 3, providing intensive, highly individualized comprehensive interventions.
Out of those intensive Tier 3 supports comes the Behavioral Intervention Plan, or BIP. Notice the wording from the source here, it's a proactive strategy. It delineates the steps required to teach an alternative behavior that corresponds to the purpose of the problem behavior. So if a student was acting out just to get some attention, the BIP proactively teaches them a healthy alternative way to ask for it.
So, what does this actually look like on a daily basis? Teachers can transform their classrooms using some simple but deeply powerful tools. The source material highlights teacher praise, noting that it's been proven to convey powerful social approval on positive behavior. Another total game changer is maintaining high rates of active student response. Simply put, if you give learners way more opportunities to actively respond and engage, their energy goes straight into learning, leaving far less room for disruptive stuff.
But listen, we don't just want teachers managing things, we absolutely want to empower the students themselves. We do this by teaching key self-management skills in a specific 4-step sequence, teaching them self-monitoring, followed by self-evaluation, self-reinforcement, and self-instruction. By giving them these tools, we are literally handing them the keys to their own progress and autonomy.
As we wrap up this explainer, this final note from the source material is arguably the most important one of all. Based on fair assessment results, every single learner with EBD has the fundamental, legal right to be placed in the least restrictive environment possible. The goal is never to isolate or hide these students away. The goal is deep, meaningful inclusion armed with the exact right support.
So, knowing all this, I want to leave you with a final thought to ponder. We've traced the path from defining the disorder through strict assessment, deep behavior analysis, and proactive tiered support. Now that we understand this framework, how can we all apply these insights in our own spheres to truly transform the educational landscape? How can we ensure our classrooms are environments that don't just manage behavior, but actively empower every single learner? Thanks so much for exploring this vital topic with me today.